Hello, everyone. I hope you have been doing your last minute revision. This is to help you with your GCSE English Literature Paper 1, both Section A and Section B. We will be looking at one of the most important questions. Taking Macbeth as a reference for Section A, I understand that your school might have chosen a different text for you, but then the structure remains same. And we are going to look at how to structure the essay response in order to get score between 26 to 34 for your section A, which is a level 6 response. Let us understand how to structure it. And even if the text is different, you can still apply the same structure to it. If you don't know it, let me emphasize on how this has 4 extra marks, your section A, where you are supposed to use the key terminologies and sophisticated vocabulary for fulfilling AO4. So spelling and punctuation is also very important. And this is not for AO4 in isolation. This would also level up your response altogether. And your AO1 marks will also be increased as a result of doing well for AO4. So the question before you starts with a bullet point. You know that you will be given the extract in the question paper. Extract, act, and scene number. All these details will be given with a brief one-line introduction to the scene, the event to which the scene is related. That should help you in interpreting the extract and using that as your source for answering bullet point 1, which is how far Shakespeare presents Lady Macbeth as a strong female character in this conversation. So you can plan to write a total of 4 paragraphs, excluding the introduction and conclusion. So goes without saying, we start with introduction. In introduction, we would clearly specify, and the first sentence itself should answer the question. So an example of how your introduction can go would be, Shakespeare presents Lady Macbeth as a powerful and dominant female character, or you can reiterate what has been given in the question, a strong female character in this conversation by or through the use, or if you're writing by using. And now you're going to list your observation, because your each opinion, each view has to be based on evidence. So some of the points that we could use to justify this thesis statement would include use of imperatives. She uses imperative. She uses rhetorical question. She uses a series of rhetorical questions, in fact. Other than that, she uses metaphor, personification, yes. So these are some of the examples of the techniques you can list in the introductory paragraph. But then the second sentence in the introduction would be about how she has been presented in the play as a whole, how far she has been presented, as it asks. So, given that you know the plot and you understand the character arc of Lady Macbeth, you know how, even though initially she has been portrayed and depicted as a dominant female character, and she's the one who manipulates Macbeth and is also the driving force behind Duncan's murder that Macbeth commits. But after this action, after the regicide, she is shown as vulnerable. She is guilt ridden. So we can mention how, as the play progresses, the writer has also showed, even though she had power and agency initially, but as the play progresses, it changes. And her vulnerability is known. Following this, we come to our paragraph 1. Every time you're writing a paragraph, it should answer the question directly, like the introduction has done. Every time you start a paragraph, it's ideal to have a topic sentence followed by evidence, which consists of quote and technique, followed by an explanation of the same. Again, all of this has to be tied back to the question each time. Tied back to the question means they should answer the question. They have to be relevant. So the paragraph 1 needs to have all the details from the extract which has shown her strength. The quotes have to be embedded in the sentence, as you know. They should become part of your explanation. So she launches a verbal assault, almost a devastating verbal assault, by responding to Macbeth's declaration, which says, "We will proceed no further in this business." Macbeth says, "We will proceed no further in this business," but she responds with a devastating verbal assault on his masculinity. She provokes him. And this is when she uses rhetorical question, which says, now it has to be in double inverted comma whenever you are quoting it, "Was a hope drunk wherein you dressed yourself." Following that, she also says, "Had it slept since, and wakes it now to look so green and pale?" So she describes, okay, I'll just write green and pale, green and pale. So what she does here is exposing his inconsistency and cowardice. So metaphorically, Hope has been described as being drunk and turning green and pale, which reduces Macbeth's earlier ambition to something sickly and weak. She also weaponizes the patriarchal values of the time against him. So if you have revised the context, the gender norms back then for the Jacobean audience, it has been challenged by Lady Macbeth in this scene. She also uses the term unsafe. So that she can through this, she rejects the conventional feminine traits and tries to embody the traditionally um, male, traditionally perceived as masculine, all those values. So she rejects the suppressive and oppressive femininity as relevant to the Victorian audience and embraces masculinity. We can talk about how she has been depicted as the driving force. The driving force, the one who controls the dialogue, the one who uses imperative language and also emotionally blackmails Macbeth to do what she wants him to do. But here you can also talk about the contemporary audience, the audience in the Jacobean society. You can talk about great chain of being and how the witchcraft and gender, the view that they held about witchcraft and gender would position Lady Macbeth as terrifying and unnatural. But despite that, she has been depicted by Shakespeare as having agency in a patriarchal world where women usually and normally had less or little direct power and agency. Following this, we can move to paragraph 3. Now we are talking about the play as a whole. Whenever you have to do this, look at the character's the character arc. Character arc is about the character's journey throughout the play from the beginning towards the end. So we have already made a statement in the introduction about how she, even though comes up as a very strong and dominant character initially, but it is not long lasting. It doesn't last for long. It's temporary, and how she ends up being very vulnerable and almost guilt ridden as the play progresses and the action has been done. The regicide has been committed. So we would talk about how she calls on spirits to and says, unsex me here, and replaces her milk of human kindness with gall. She, in her invocation of the supernatural, it shows a willingness to damn herself for power, forsake herself for power. We can talk about her strength, the strength as depicted initially. But then this was momentary. Shakespeare slowly and gradually reveals the limits of her strength. And somewhere, if you know, she went against the norms of the Jacobean audience and the norms, the conventions of that age. So she had to, there had to be downfall of this character. And we see after Duncan's murder, she is traumatized. Even though Macbeth committed it, her situation is no different from that of Macbeth. And her speech is fragmented now. It is also guilt ridden. Initially, it was, if you remember, imperatives, rhetorical questions, but now the commanding rhetoric, it disintegrates into fragmented and guilt ridden speech. We have relevant quotations like out, damn, spot, another, which you can include here. The sleepwalking scene, you can talk about that. The sleepwalking scene, it shows how suppressed guilt can consume the mind, how it consumes the mind. And we know how later the off-stage death, likely to be suicide, is how the play concludes. So you can either write it in the same paragraph. If you have more quotations, you can make it two. Following that, we move to the conclusion. The conclusion has to be evaluative in nature, evaluative overview, and by that, what it means, to what extent you think Shakespeare has been able to present her as a powerful Lady Macbeth, as a powerful female character. So we would again reiterate how in the early acts, in the initial acts, especially this conversation, she eclipses, the word is eclipse. She eclipses her husband, but it is soon revealed that this strength is unsustainable, doesn't last longer, it's temporary power, and the psychological, and spiritual consequences. They cannot really escape the psychological and spiritual consequences of the crime. So, even though Lady Macbeth is presented as one of Shakespeare's fiercest, or one of the fiercest, or the strongest character, in the end, she is a tragic figure because the character arc completes with a suicide. So yes, that is it for section A. Now we will move to section B. So for section B, we have chosen this from Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. The structure of the paragraph is going to be the same, so I would just highlight the points you can include in the paragraphs in your essay. How Dickens presents Scrooge in this extract, the one given in the question, and how Dickens presents the lessons Scrooge learns about life in the novel as a whole, where we are again going to look at the character arc of Scrooge and include evidence accordingly, which is relevant to the question. So we will start with the introduction. We can talk about how Dickens presents Scrooge as a man in the process, or as a man undergoing the process of transformation, of emotional transformation. And when he is confronted with Cratchit's family and Tiny Tim's sickness is frailty, he moves from cold detachment to kind and compassionate person who understands the value of human connection. So again, like the last question here, the first sentence in your introduction would be about this extract and how Scrooge is presented here. And the second sentence in the introduction can be about how he has been presented in the novel as a whole. So initially, he lacked warmth, he was cold, he was impolite, he was a misanthrope. If you know the word, if you don't, I'm writing it for you. Misanthrope. It transforms from himself from a misanthrope to a philanthrope. People hating to people loving. We move to paragraph 1 after this. Scrooge in this extract. So all that we talk about here is going to be about Scrooge in this extract. Again, topic sentence, evidence, explanation. Dickens shows his Scrooge's gradual softening through his response and reaction to through his reaction to the Cratchit's family. Or you can just say the Cratchits. When the ghost reveals to him about Tiny Tim's likely death, Scrooge's response is no, no, oh no. Kind spirit. You can quote it. So this is a desperate plea. Desperate plea. So the person who didn't care about human bondings at all, about human relationships at all, is affected deeply by this news. This shows how he's undergoing a change. He's undergoing a change. He's no more the same person. So initially he was indifferent, but now he is no more the same person. So it reveals a shift from his earlier indifference. And his empathy, it grows. We can talk about contrast as a technique, how this contrasts with his initial response and attitude. With that, we conclude our paragraph 1 about the extract, and we would move to paragraph 2. Paragraph 2. So, Cratchit's family has been used as a powerful symbol of hard-working, poor. So, the conventional outlook to the poor at that time, in the Victorian era, it was to look at them as lazy, people who don't want to work. Underprivileged people were looked at as lazy people. So that and that's how it was justified. The upper class, the people in the upper strata of the society, here Scrooge represents every other wealthy man who would look down upon the underprivileged because of their resistance to work hard, because of their laziness. But here it shows the Cratchit's family as a complete contrast to the popular belief of the wealthy people about them. And they have been shown as being joyful and loving. which again contrasts with Scrooge's wealth. He's wealthy, but he is only wealthy. So this scene to the Victorian audience, you can talk about what it means to them, what it means to the Victorian audience. Because Dickens was writing during a time of great poverty and inequality. So Scrooge feels shame, and through Scrooge, it is a comment on everybody else whom Scrooge represents here. So, by making Scrooge feel shame, Dickens urges the middle class readers to rethink and examine their attitudes towards the poor. So, Scrooge's discomfort shows the beginning of his moral awakening, is how you can conclude that. Paragraph 3. Who was Scrooge? Initially, who is he becoming? Who is he transforming into slowly? So now we start talking about Scrooge across the novel or throughout the novel. So Scrooge learns from the different ghosts that he faces. So starting with the ghost of Christmas past, he forces Scrooge to confront his lonely childhood. So we can talk about his lonely childhood. His lonely childhood, love and lost chances or opportunities. And with that is connected the idea of importance of human relationships. Ghost of Christmas Present exposes the sufferings of the underprivileged or the poor. So the Cratchits and the Miners, their suffering is showed, and it tells Scrooge about how ignorance and want are dangerous, and that wealth, it also brings responsibility, the responsibility of charity with it. Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, it delivers the harshest lesson. The horror of dying. Death is horrible, but what is more horrible is the horror of dying without being mourned, dying alone and unmourned. So the vision of Tiny Tim's death, showed by the ghost of yet to come, it shows and teaches Scrooge to undergo a genuine change and transformation. And Scrooge finally understands the lesson of kindness, that mankind, this is one of the key quotations, is my business. And that charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence, they are essential. And with this, he becomes the second father. The second father to Tiny Tim, while embracing the spirit of Christmas. No, we are not done yet. With this, we have to move to the conclusion, which we know is evaluative in nature, to what extent the writer has been able to do what he has done here based on the question. So we would say Dickens presents Scrooge as a character beginning to learn empathy and regret, which marks the turning point in his transformation, in his redemption. And across the novel, he learns profound lessons. The word is profound. Profound lessons about social responsibility, social responsibility, about kindness and compassion, about value of, can we say, value of family, as well as the possibility of personal change. So you can just write everything about Scrooge's character arc that you have been reading about. So it is never too late. The writer emphasizes on the idea that it is never too late to redeem oneself, and that true happiness comes from compassion. Okay, my bad. Compassion rather than greed. So the novel concludes with this optimistic, this positive message. So, yes, you can expect the remaining papers to be uploaded in a similar fashion. So soon I will be uploading it for the literature paper 2 and the other two language papers as well.